co-founder of Engage by Cell. It's a mobile technology company, been around 16 years. And Glenn, give us a sentence on yourself and then more in just a minute.
Well, I am a freelance professional speaker. I focus on helping teams solve collaboration and communication problems. So I do presentations and webinars at conferences for individual companies, webinars like this. I'm a retired IBM guy. I worked for the IBM Corporation for a long time before I went into the freelance speaking thing. And as you'll hear in a couple of minutes, I've also spent most of my adult life studying and performing improv comedy. And I'll tell you a story about that a little later on too. Learned a lot about communication and collaboration through
Oh,
improv.
I bet. And Glenn, you do some consulting even though you're retired. So if some of the folks here want to dive deeper, we'll get your email later on, I
Yep,
guess, and they can contact you.
absolutely. Thanks for the plug, David.
Great. All right. So the next slide shows just a little bit about us. As I said, we've been around 16, 17 years working with workforce development with charities like CASA and Goodwill and healthcare like Tufts. So a whole breadth of different organizations um, focused on two different services. And we'll show you those in just a second. So next slide. Those services are a text messaging service, which I am a tremendous believer that just about everybody on this call and their organization could benefit from a texting solution to help communication, which is why we're talking with Glenn. And then we have a mobile web app platform as well. All right, everybody on the call, we need to make this interactive because you're going to get a few text messages throughout the 40 minutes or so. Everybody take out your phone. Glenn, you should do that too. Scan that QR code. It'll pop up a little pop-up and it'll open up your text messaging. And then you can click send and it'll have the word demo and you'll get thanks for joining. So go ahead, some of you, Ginger and Anna and Barbara, go ahead and do that. And when you get the message, let us know that it's working and make a note in the chat window. I got a thumbs up from Glenn. How about some thumbs up from our rousing audience here? There we go. I love that. Keep that going. So thanks everybody for that. And then Anna will send a few text messages during the presentation. It's just fun. All right, one more slide and then we'll turn it over to Glenn. Why is Engage by Cell hosting this communication webinar? Well, like our name says, everything we do has to do with engagement. And mobile websites and text messaging can play such a big role in helping people read the emails since it's sent by text. So we'll talk more about us later, but when we heard about Glenn and know his work with SHRM, we thought, wow, our audience would just love to hear from a true expert. And Glenn, let me turn it over to you. And then, as I said to everybody earlier, save your questions for later, but all your thumbs up, all your little comments, throw those in the webinar chat so we can keep that going.
All righty, thanks, David. When I think about building better team communications, I always come back to a quote that's been attributed to George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And so let me begin our time together here by telling you a personal story about a time when I thought communication was taking place and it really was not. I was traveling on business. I was in one of my favorite cities in the world, Montpellier, France. I love France. I love French food. I do not speak any French. One night we had worked pretty late and I was tired and I just didn't feel like tackling another big French menu and a complicated French dinner. So I decided to do something that normally I would never do when I'm traveling in a foreign country. Just grab something to eat at the McDonald's that was in the town square. I'm thinking, how hard can this be? So I walk into the McDonald's and I'm encouraged. I see up above the cashiers the typical lighted menu we're used to seeing, and they even had the numbered meals. So I thought this is going to be easy. So I step up to the cashier and using my fingers, I indicate, two. I want meal number two. And the cashier, she starts yapping at me in French. And I'm trying to figure out what could she be asking me? It's a predefined meal. And after I thought about it for a second, I realized the only variable in this is what beverage I would want to get with the meal. So when she finished yapping at me in French, I looked at her and very confidently I said, Coca-Cola. And she looked back at me and in perfect English, she said to me, I was asking you if you wanted ketchup for your French fries. See, I thought communication was taking place. Now, obviously, the language barrier had something to do with this, but nevertheless, it turned out it was an illusion that we were actually communicating. How can we, in a team environment with your colleagues at work, with the department, of the people that you work with, how can you avoid that illusion and actually make sure you are having effective communications? Well, this is the thesis I want to share with you here today. To connect with people, to communicate effectively with people, you want to do two things. Keep their favorable attention and gift them with your attention. Now, most people focus on the first one. They think, I want to hold people's attention. It's all about me. If I'm a good communicator, if I'm speaking interestingly, they will listen to me, I will keep their attention. The part that people miss is that to really be effective as a communicator, connecting with people, you need to be gifting those people with your attention. So what I want to share with you for a few minutes here today are a few tips, suggestions on how to keep people's attention and then how to gift people with your attention. So let's begin by looking at some ideas for keeping people's favorable attention. And the first one is get their eyebrows up. Have you ever thought about this? When people's eyebrows are up, they're engaged, they're interested, they want to hear more. The opposite, when you furrow your eyebrows, people are confused or they don't agree with you or they're not sure they understand. I mean, try it right now as you're sitting there at your desk. You raise your eyebrows. How do you feel? You furrow your eyebrows. How do you feel? Or maybe your eyebrows are just kind of neutral. You're not really engaged, but you're not confused either. You're just kind of in the middle. So, how do you get people's eyebrows up? You ask questions. Did you know? You get them excited right from the start. Did you know that we could increase the productivity of our sales team by providing access to real-time data? Imagine, imagine what our sales team could do if they each had tablets with access to the latest information. So you ask these kinds of questions, you get their eyebrows up. But if you're giving them thoughts that are confusing them, their eyebrows are furrowed, they're not understanding what you're saying. Remember, confused people don't say yes to what you're asking. So the first thing you want to do is get people's eyebrows up. The second thing you want to do is make sure that what you're saying is repeatable by them. If people can't repeat what you just said to them, then they probably didn't get it. I mean, this is not complicated. If you have got something that you're giving them to do, you've got an action item, you're giving them something that you want them to take away, you want to condense that down into something very simple and memorable that they can repeat, maybe one sentence. True communication isn't what you are saying, it's what the receiver takes away. Again, this is not complicated, but this is so important. If people can't repeat what you are saying, then they probably did not really understand or get what you were saying. And then there's a couple things that you want to avoid. You want to avoid jargon, and you will want to avoid something called the curse of knowledge. Now, when you think about jargon, it might be useful. You think, hey, Everybody that's listening to me knows the jargon, and so I can save some time. I can talk in jargon and everybody will know what I mean. But is that really true? Because jargon can bury the very thing that you want your audience to understand. And if there's someone or a couple people out there that don't know all the jargon, then you're losing them. To me, jargon, and this is whether it's written communication, a text, an email, or you're speaking to someone, jargon is lazy language. It puts the responsibility for the clarity of what you're saying on the listener, and that's not what you want. And another thing kind of similar to that that you want to avoid is what's called the curse of knowledge. If you're not familiar with this, this is when you can't imagine what it's like to not have the knowledge that you have. You are certain that everyone that's listening to you, everyone that is reading your text or your email, that they have the same knowledge that you do. And that might not be true. And so you do not want to make that assumption. So for both of these, jargon and the curse of knowledge, you are keeping you, the speaker, from considering your listener. You are not really considering your listener. You're using lazy language and you're making an assumption that might not be true. How long will this take? People want to know how long this communication that you have initiated with them is going to take. This is the elephant in the room of every business transaction, of every communication event that is taking place. Folks, if they don't know how long you expect them to give you their attention, they tune out. They want to know. Joe, I need 5 minutes of your time to share this idea with you. Hey, boss, I need 10 minutes to update you on how our project is going. People want to know, how long will this take? And if you don't tell them, and if they don't know, they're tuning out. Now, I say this kind of thinking in terms of spoken communication, but this also applies, of course, to written communication. There's a communication style called smart brevity that I think is very interesting. This was created by the folks that created the news website called Axios. If you're not familiar with this, you might want to check it out. As you see in the little yellow circle there, smart brevity is about the power of saying more with less. And that's what the Axios website is about. It's about delivering news in a very short and effective and succinct manner. And so there's a style of written communication that they have developed that include these kinds of thoughts. Stop being selfish when you're creating written communication. You don't have to show off everything that you know. Folks, there is a myth in communication and in public speaking. And the myth is that in order for your audience to understand anything, you have to tell them everything. And that is not true. Stop being selfish. Grab their attention with the first sentence in your written communication. What is it you want them to know right up front? Write like a human. You know, sometimes we write with long sentences and flowery language that we would never use if we were just having a conversation with someone. So write like a human, the way that you speak. Keep it scannable, bullets, short paragraphs, easily copied and paste perhaps into another document or email, and then stop when enough is enough. Aren't you excited to receive a text that disappears off the bottom of your phone screen, or get an email that disappears off the bottom of your computer screen when you open it up? People don't read these kinds of things. And so these are some tips for a communication style called smart brevity. So those are a few ideas for helping keep people's attention when you are communicating with them. Get their eyebrows up. Make sure it's repeatable. Avoid jargon. Avoid the curse of knowledge, and make sure that people understand how long do you want them to give you their attention, because they want to know how long is this going to take. So now let's look at a few ideas for gifting people with your attention. Again, as I mentioned a moment ago, I think this is the one that people often overlook. And I want to tell you a story. For me, good communication, really understanding communication and team collaboration, really started with my experiences performing and studying improvisational comedy. I attended and graduated from the Players Workshop of the Second City, the famous improv club here in Chicago where I live. So let me tell you a story, one example of how I learned something about communication and collaboration. One night I was standing on the stage of a comedy club and I was waiting for the audience to provide a suggestion that my acting partner Chris and I were going to use to create an improvised scene. Now, if you've ever seen improv comedy before, you know how this works. Maybe you've watched the television show Whose Line Is It Anyway? The actors come on stage, they ask for a suggestion, and then they create an improv scene on the fly with no script, no pre planning, no rehearsal. So, this particular night, Chris and I were going to ask for the suggestion of a location. Now, when you ask for a location, of course, you have no idea what you're going to get. You might get something very vague like France, or maybe a little better, Paris. A good suggestion might be under the Eiffel Tower. Now, that would be a nice suggestion for an improv. So, on this particular night, we asked for a suggestion of a location, and we got a great suggestion. The location was a high rise office building and a corner office. So, now what happens with improv is Chris and I turn to each other, and one of us needs to initiate the scene. So that night I turned to Chris, and based on that suggestion, I looked at him and I said, "Thank you for coming to see me. I want to review your job performance for the last several months." Now, what had I done with that? I'd kind of established it's my office, I'm the boss, he's my employee, he's come in for a job performance review. Well, Chris looked back at me and he said, "I don't have to listen to you. You're not my boss." So in one line, Chris had negated everything I was trying to build with my line. So I looked back at him and I said, "Well, actually, I am your boss. Apparently, you never read the email." And Chris said, "Well, I don't read any emails. They never gave me a computer." Again, negating everything I was trying to create with my opening lines. See, what I needed Chris to do was to take my suggestion, my opening line, and build on it. In improv terminology, I needed Chris to say, "Yes, and." Yes, I hear and acknowledge what you have said, and now I'm going to build on it. Instead, Chris was saying no, or Chris was saying yes, but. If you take this thinking of yes and apply it to your team communication, it creates a culture of open communication. People who say no, or people who say yes, but, are people who are trying to maintain control of the conversation. They're trying to maintain control of the idea. There are just so many ways that people can block communication in a team environment, in a team meeting environment. People who always say no, changing the subject, correcting the speaker, having a better idea, not listening to what that person is saying, simply saying no. No one likes the curmudgeon who thinks it's their job to say no to everything. Folks, don't be this guy, all right? If you go into your team meetings, into your team communication sessions thinking I'm the person that has to say no to everything, you are setting yourself up as more important than all your teammates, as smarter than all your teammates, and it is blocking communication, the opposite of what you want, an environment of open communication. When you say yes and, that little word and becomes a bridge between what the first person has said and now your response, your respectful response. Now, don't get confused. People sometimes think I'm saying you should say yes to everything. And I'm not saying that you are agreeing. You say, "Yes, I hear what you said," but then, and I'm not sure this is a great idea, and I'm not sure why this would work. I mean, you might not agree with what you're saying. So I'm not saying you're running around just saying yes, 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 but you are creating an environment of open communication by acknowledging what other people are saying and then responding to it, not simply saying no all the time. Another way to gift people with your attention is to be the person that wants to have more meaningful conversations. And there are lots of ways to do this. For example, don't go around just using standard openers. How you doing today? Fine. Hey, how's it going? Great. That doesn't get conversations going. Instead, hey, what'd you do this weekend that was fun? What are you working on this week that you're really excited about? That begins a more meaningful conversation. Ask for advice. The way to a person's heart is through their opinions. People love when you ask for advice and they can offer your opinion, and that creates a more meaningful conversation. Use the magic words, tell me. Don't just say, how was your vacation? That was great. Tell me, what was the most beautiful scenery you saw on your vacation? Tell me, what was the most fun activity you and your family did while you were away for the weekend? Tell me. Those are magic words. And then turn back more conversations than you take back. Every time someone stops talking, you have a choice to make. You can either grab the conversation at that point and take it over, or you can turn it back by asking a question, by asking for advice, by asking a question would tell me. You're turning back the conversation. Now, you don't always want to turn it back, then it turns into a monologue by the person that you're communicating with. But if you think about the fact that I'm not just waiting to take back the conversation, I want to turn it back. That is gifting people with your attention and creating more meaningful conversations. And then the third area is listening, as we already mentioned a little bit. And there are so many bad listening behaviors out there these days. Interrupting the other person, responding, vaguely. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Fidgeting, clicking a pen, shifting around, tapping on the table, looking at your phone. I mean, think about this. People in the little survey that Anna and David did at the beginning said distractions, are keeping you from having open and good communication. How often are you sitting in someone's office and on their desk right there in front of them is their cell phone? And every time it dings or make a noise, they stop looking and listening to you and they glance down at their phone. That is bad listening behavior. Folks, you want to gift people with your attention by being a good listener. And here's the issue. Most people don't listen with the intent to fully understand what the other person is saying. They're only listening with the intent to reply. What that means is you're just waiting for the other person to stop talking so you can start talking. And a good listener, an effective listener, an active listener is listening all the way to the end of what your partner is saying, understanding what they're saying, and then formulating a response. So connecting with people, effectively communicating, it's about keeping people's attention and gifting those people with your attention. So we looked at a bunch of ideas for keeping favorable attention. Eyebrows up, making sure you understand how long this will take. Think about the whole communication style of smart brevity. Make sure what you're saying is repeatable. Avoid using jargon. Avoid the curse of knowledge. And then 3 ways to gift people with your attention. Think and say yes and. Remember the story I told you. Think like an improv actor collaborating on stage. Learn to have more meaningful conversations, and then be the person that truly listens to understand, not just listens to reply. This is me. As we talked about at the beginning of the hour, I try to solve teams communication and collaboration problems. I have a number of topics that I can talk about or consult with. You can see those here. My email is at the bottom there. My website is at the bottom. I'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback on what we've talked about today, or if there's some way I could help you and your team going forward. If you like reading books, here's 3 books I would recommend. Got Your Attention, really wonderful little book by a creative lady named Sam Horn. You probably know the actor Alan Alda, very well known. I love the title. If I understood you, would I have this look on my face? Another great book about being an effective communicator. And then if you want to delve a little more into the world of yes and thinking, here's a great book with some lessons from the Second City Improv Club in Chicago. In Alan Alda's book, he wraps up with what he describes as the dance of communication. If we remember that every conversation we have, every bit of advice we give, every email we write can be an exchange in which the other person, remember this is focused on the other person, might have a better way of looking at it. When you do that, then Alan Alda says you have a chance to be in sync, to have this beautiful dance of communication with your partner. It's a dance, folks, that you learn by trusting yourselves to take the leap into the tips and suggestions I've given you today to become a more effective team communicator. So those are my thoughts today on building better team communication. David, I'll turn it back over to you.
And that was terrific. I took a whole page of notes. This is the time, all of you folks, I bet you all have many questions for Glenn like I do. Glenn, I'm going to, let's go back to your slide for a second, Glenn, do some Q&A. Several questions. You talk about gifting kind of my attention, but if I gift my attention and I spend my entire time with you asking questions, selfishly, I'm never going to get to what I want, which is I want you to do what I want. So, I mean, I could spend 20 minutes, how was this and what about, and what a great idea. But deep down, it's like, I got the answer here. What,
Yeah,
how do you resolve that?
well, to me, everything is a balance, right? I mean, there's, you can go too far one way, too far the other way. Remember that my statement is two things, holding their attention with your thoughts and gifting them with yours. And I maybe overemphasize the gifting a little bit with your attention to the other person, because I think that's the part people ignore. They just talk, 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 talk. So I would say the answer to your concern is simply that it is a balance. And yes, you do want to at times turn back the conversation to them, but then eventually you do need to take back the conversation
Yeah,
and say something
at some point.
and get their
Yep.
eyebrows up.
Yep.
I mean, those are all part of a good communicator as well. It's both halves.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you can overdo the let me encourage your conversation. At some point, there does need to be a solution. Or is it going to be red or is it going to be green? And
Just like you can to go too far the other way and make it all about you and forget about the other person at all. So
yeah,
right down the middle, always the right place to be, right? Good balance.
Let's look at some of the questions in the chat. So everybody, this is your one chance. The questions cost nothing here for Glenn. So ask away. I love Lucy's question here. When someone is blocking everything and brings the team down, and that can be very subtle. It's not like that was a bad idea. It's like, well, that's never going to work here, or we tried that, or the 1,000 negatives. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think the way to approach it is for you to, first of all, be the example of the way you think it should work, and try to be that person that is creating the environment of open communication, that is responding with yes and thinking to what other people are saying, and just hope that people kind of see the value of what you are doing. I think if you have a story you can tell that illustrates, a time when that worked well, people always respond better to stories than they do to just being given some facts or told how to do something. So I think a combination of your example and a story that might help someone understand is a good way to kind of approach. Maybe if you got a good buddy on your team that you think might kind of agree with you,
Yeah,
but is being kind of quiet about it, you get them on your side. Now you got two people that are behaving in an open communication way. That's the way I would approach it.
mm-hmm. Gustin references that you look like Alan Alda. Has anybody ever said that to you before?
Yes, yes. Not so much look like, but people often say my voice reminds them of Alan Alda. And I don't show his book to make that comparison. His book is wonderful.
That is
I take
funny.
that as a great compliment. So thank you very much.
That is funny. Glenn, a question I thought of, and please, everybody that's on the webinar, let's keep the questions going here. These are great. so many conversations, communication are done now through Zoom. So I can't really tell if you're if you're looking at CNN or you're texting. But I have a feeling that based on the eye movement, I don't have everybody's attention. How do I, as the leader of that conversation, get everybody back to focusing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you already suggested that that people's cameras are on. I mean, I certainly feel like, just like if you were sitting in a meeting room, obviously you can't hide. So I feel like a good Zoom meeting, there should be rules that everyone follows, that their cameras are on, that their microphones, as long as it's not going to be intrusive, are engaged, just like you'd all be sitting around a meeting room in a conference room. So first of all, I think that's the way it should be. Secondly, I think there needs to be someone always in a Zoom meeting or any kind of remote virtual meeting that is kind of the facilitator, that is making sure that everyone is participating. So David, we haven't heard from you in a
Yeah.
couple minutes. What do you think about this? Anna,
Uh-huh.
we need to hear from you on this. I mean, and the facilitator makes sure that that's happening. And I think if someone knows that they're going to get called on eventually, they might tend to be listening
Yeah.
a little better. And so you see those eyes drifting away. The facilitator says, "David, and really, I mean, I think those are two rules you need to follow for good virtual meetings: have a facilitator and have
Mm-hmm.
rules about cameras being on and microphones being enabled."
I loved your comment that so many people listen to reply versus listening to understand. And my experience is it's very predominant when I'm dealing with a superior, because my superior, why am I taking my superior's time? I don't have that much time to review this topic. I've got other things going on. In their mind, they may have the answer, which is a little different than what I'm suggesting. So if I notice that that's what's going on with somebody maybe a little higher up, what do I do?
Yeah, I guess I call them on it. I mean, I wouldn't be
Mhm.
afraid. I mean, I feel like if you're trying to build a better communication environment, when you see people that are continuously not doing the kinds of things that create an environment of open communication, that you call them on it. I mean, boss, did you really hear everything that I said there?
Mhm.
At the end of that, I was talking about this particular point. Can you? I mean, maybe this is a little too forward, but can you repeat? Can you repeat that back to me?
Right.
What I just said. I want to make sure you're taking it away.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Daniel has a question about with a large audience, whether it's on Zoom or in person. Anything specific, Glenn, you've done? Obviously, you've spoken in front of thousands of people before. Much harder to get people's attention when they're in the 30th row and they're on their phone or their laptop.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a Zoom meeting, again, things like the little polling that you did at the beginning is a good way to grab people's attention. Making sure people understand how to use the chat window. Again, David, you guys were a perfect example of that by asking people to kind of put their name in and where they're from. That gets people familiar with the chat technology if they really aren't, and encourages them to do a little typing. I mean, there's so many limited things you can do when you're in Zoom that you just have to take advantage of the chat window and polling, and even everything, when you get into public speaking, everything that makes a good public speaker, your voice, your energy, the charts that you're using, they're all exaggerated when you're doing a remote presentation or a webinar. Everything has to be lifted up a little more energy, little
Mm-hmm.
more energy in your voice. Make sure the charts are really engaging. uh, and I think the comment I made earlier about how long is this going to take, I think when you're giving a little presentation online, it's really important. Everybody's out there in a remote situation. They're waiting to make lunch. The dog has to go for a walk. The baby's crying. How long is this going to take? I think is even a more important thing for people to
Mm-hmm.
understand. So you want to really care about your audience out there, and give them, that little bit of extra energy.
I do think in presentations when the speaker asks people in the middle, to scan a QR code or text in and answer a poll question, everybody has to reset.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I'm now back in this again.
Yep.
Nikita asked an interesting question, kind of an HR situation, which probably many of the folks here are in HR and workforce and training. The individual I'm speaking with is kind of shutting down. It's just not a pleasant, great conversation. What do you recommend in that situation?
I'd go back to the suggestions I had on how to be the person that creates a more meaningful conversation. Asking for advice, asking that person for a suggestion, or going back to the magic words, tell me about this. I mean, when you ask that kind of question and they can tell you are truly listening to the answer, and then perhaps following up with another comment or question that shows you were listening to them. But I think those kinds of things will get them re-engaged,
Yeah.
especially the asking for advice. So if someone's kind of fading away and not listening to you anymore, and you say, "Hey, tell me, I really need some help here. Can you help me with this?" Boom, that gets people refocused pretty well.
It's great. Glenn, let's go to a few more slides. Feel free to ask questions, everybody. One of the services that Engage by Cell provides is a text messaging service. And it's not the be all and end all to everything that Glenn is talking about, but certainly when it comes time to communicate via normal ways, mail or email, text messaging has such a greater oomph to it and open rate. So think about a technology to at least help address some of these situations. Then the next slide. And I will offer up to everybody, any organization that wants to play around with text messaging, we would be glad to set you up with a test account, show you how it works, use it for your employees, use it for your customers. It's going to definitely solve some communication issues. So all you've got to do is reply to the text that Anna just sent to everybody, or you can make a little note in the chat window before we end the webinar. Just put your email there. Anna will send you a little form to fill out, and then you'll have a little text messaging account. So that is our little plug for how Engage by Cell could possibly help a little bit on the communication side. And then the final slide. Here are email addresses. We will send out this presentation with Glenn's contact info and mine as well. And everybody can feel free to contact Glenn or myself. Glenn, obviously, as the communication expert, and me for any of the technology stuff. Final questions from folks before we head out. Go ahead, and we have another minute or two. Thank you, Jade. That was great. Yeah, Glenn, your presentation and your insight. You can tell you've been around doing this a few times, and I love the Second City reference. Second City is a classically, I mean, it's a communication vehicle is what it is. And it's amazing your background there and with IBM. Any more comments? Thank you, everybody. We will hang out here for a while. We'll end it in 3 or 4 minutes. For those of you that have to go back to work or lunch, go ahead and do that. We'll be around if there are more questions that are coming up. And as I said, toss in your email address if you'd like a texting account. And we will hang out here and catch all of you in the future. Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Jocelyn. And Glenn, you are helping companies on some of these topics. I'm guessing probably there's big companies and small little divisions that probably come to you.
Yeah, honestly, most of my work has been in the kind of situation where Anna ran into me at the SHRM conference, where
Yeah.
I get brought into a multi-corporate event like that to do a workshop with a number of people. I'd certainly be amenable to being called into an individual company
Hmm.
to consult, but I'll be honest with you, it seems like most of the time people want me for a speaker,
For speaking. Yeah.
or a webinar, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
Deep
love,
dish pizza.
I
Yeah.
love this deep dish pizza. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's funny.
Yeah. Giordano's, all the classic
Hey, I
deep
have a
dish pizza
Giordano's
places.
down the street from where I live. It's very
Okay.
tempting.
Here we go. That's one of the best in the country.
My pie, yeah, my pie, yeah. Okay, well now we're having a pizza discussion. This
That's
is really
good.
useful, David. This is good stuff here.
That's right. I like that. Yeah. That is excellent. There's Rhonda. Thanks, Rhonda. Nice to meet you. And if any of you are in Chicago, like Michelle and some of those, maybe Glenn and all of you could have a little mini session at My Pie and Clark and Fullerton sometime
There
later
you
this
go.
month. I'm
Sure.
sure Glenn would love that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, I think we will wrap it up. And thanks so much, Glenn. And we will send you, Glenn, anybody that is interested in your contact info. We'll send them your way.
Great. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks
Great
so much.
question. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.